Aspire Talks. Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suray Sachet Sukha Swarupaya Swami Netapaharine. We have been discussing what Swamiji was telling his students on July 6th. And that day, Swamiji was discussing from Brahma Sutra by Acharya Shankar, commentary by Acharya Shankar. In the previous talk, we had a long discussion on the introduction by Acharya, where he gives the idea of superimposition, and while discussing superimposition, he mentions two very important things that in our minds, we clearly have the distinction between who I am and what this world is, these two distinctions. We discussed that in detail, and continuing from that point, Swamiji continues with Brahma Sutra. And then he also talks about the background of the Brahma Sutra, and from there he continues his discussion on Atman. And he begins with one part of the Vedas deals with karma, form, and ceremonies. The other part deals with the knowledge of Brahman and discuss religion. Those of you who have some idea about what the Vedas are, you would be knowing. And if you look at our series of talks on Hinduism, there we have discussed in brief. It's kind of an overview of what the Vedas are. But because we are continuing with this talk, and the topic demands that we discussed in brief and what Swamiji is telling you about Karma Kanda and Jnana Kanda, the section that deals with karma and section that deals with knowledge. We don't know really when these Vedas were composed. Some say 3,000 years ago, and some say 10,000 years ago. And there's Orthodox Brahmins, they will say that it has been there since eternity. They all are correct in one way or the other, depending on which aspect of the Vedas you are looking at. That's not our subject. Thing is, how exactly the Vedas came into existence. When these great sages who had withdrawn from the worldly life and had made inner life the sole purpose of their existence, they went into contemplative states, and from there they went deeper into meditation, and they became so intense in their meditation that the working of their mind stopped. Now, what exactly is this? It's slightly difficult for us to explain in this talk. We have discussed it at different places, particularly in Raj Yoga talks, which we have been conducting. There you will see what exactly stopping of mind means. Now, when mind has one single thought, at that time, you see the reality behind this world in one form. And when that thought also stops, you see reality in a different form. Essentially, these two realities are one. And yet, they are different in more than one ways. What these sages perceived came to be known as the Vedas. But this high level of spiritual truth that was absolutely undigestible by the masses. So what these masters did, like those of you who have studied Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, you see how Sri Ramakrishna uses parables and stories and jokes to convey some certain ideas. In between, there are ideas too. Just like that, the Vedas have core knowledge the way they should be. And there are also forms and rituals. Now, why forms and rituals? Instead of focusing on stories, because the problem with these stories, howsoever spiritual they might be, is that you get lost in the pleasure of listening to the story. Those of you who have enjoyed serials on Ramayana and Mahabharata and these Puranas, you will see that you tend to forget, you tend to lose the essence, the main philosophy, and you start enjoying the story part. What these sages did was they had stories. There are portions in the Vedas which deal mostly with the stories. So, more than stories, they focus on rituals, because when you have rituals, there is an active involvement in religion. In listening to these stories, the involvement is extremely passive. So the mind listens to those stories, gets those ideas, but is not able to really absorb. And definitely it's difficult to practice. When it comes to rituals, like we have these worship and pujas and going to the temples and offering certain articles and praying, there is the actual involvement. Now, because of the actual involvement, there always is some progress, some amount of progress. Not completely, not fully, but that's acceptable. Nothing wrong with that. Now, normally we see that there are prophets and there are priests. The prophets are those who talk only about the core truth. And they're the priests who maintain these rituals. Hindus had both. There were prophets who were the sages, and there were the priests. But there was also a race that maintained this knowledge. They were known as Brahmins. These Brahmins, they were neither as great as the sages, nor were they as ordinary as the priests. They were scholarly. And because they were scholarly, but lacked the immensity of those prophets, so they went on adding to the rituals. And to entice people towards religion, they came up with different kinds of sacrifices. If you want this, you perform this yajna. And those yajnas invariably had Vedic mantras. So those Vedic mantras were chanted, and there definitely was some kind of impact in the minds of people who were involved in that. So the purpose of the Vedas was not to create rituals, not to go all out for yajna, but to create an impact on the minds of persons who were performing those yajnas and who were watching them. With time, the corpus of the Vedas became huge. And there's a story, now we don't know how true it is, that the great sage Vyasa, he organized the corpus of the Vedas in such a way that there was a portion that dealt mostly with the yajnas, sacrifices, and there was a portion that dealt with the elaboration of these sacrifices, and then there was contemplative books, and finally core truths. These respectively came to be known as Sangita, which was collection. Sangita essentially means collection of the mantras. Brahmana, elaboration of how a sacrifice was to be performed. And there were the Aranyak. Aranyak were the contemplative portion of the Vedas, and the Upanishads, which are essence of Hindu religion. Now, some sage, they started telling that the first two portions, that is Sangita and Brahman, these are meant for sacrifices. Hence, sacrifices in Sanskrit means karma, karma kanda, section dealing with karma. and the other two, they are Jnana Kanda. So that is how Vedas have come down to us. They say that the Vedas talk of two different paths, karma and jnana. Karma is when you are engaging in rituals, in sacrifices, etc. And jnana is when you are going deeper into the contemplative aspect. And finally, the realization aspect. So, thus you find in Hindu religion, of course, in every religion, you have the rituals, you have the recitals, and you have the sense of righteousness, and finally, the realization. The first three part mostly belong to rituals, and the last realization part, that is the philosophy part. So with this idea clear, we can see what Swamiji is telling. That will make sense, that will make things easy for us to understand. He says that the Vedas had two sections, and the Vedas in this part teach of the self, where the Vedas talk of Atman, realization, that is the Upanishads. Swamiji is still discussing actually Brahma Sutra. And when Acharya Shankar introduces the topic, where he says at the end of his introduction that with this idea of superimposition cleared, the discussion on Vedanta begins. Vedanta, so those who are listening would know that Vedanta is now a very popular term, and there are many people who do not want to be termed Hindus. They say we are Vedantins, whatever that might mean. So Upanishads, that is Vedanta. And Upanishads are known as Vedanta because of two reasons. One, Sveda and Anta. Anta comes in two different sense. One is the end, and second is essence. Because they come at the end of the Vedas, they are known as Vedanta. And they are also the essence of the Vedas. What exactly the purpose of the Vedas are, they are known as Vedanta. So, and because they do, their knowledge is approaching real knowledge. Says, Swamiji says, if you're really interested in understanding the religious philosophy or philosophy of religions, it is very important for you to listen to these talks on Inspired Talks, or at least to read Inspired Talks directly. Says the Upanishads, he's talking about the Upanishads. Their knowledge is approaching real knowledge. We will explain that knowledge of the absolute depends upon no book nor upon anything. It's absolute in itself. Knowledge stands by itself. It doesn't require any book. I'll give you a very interesting example of this. If you study the theory of argumentation, how argumentation is carried out, it is said that there are three very important things needed. There has to be pure arguments, absolutely pure arguments. And then second is, you can quote from certain persons who are acceptable to both. And third is based on common books. To give an example, you say that let's discuss rationally. Now, when Swami Vivekananda had gone to America and to Europe, he was mostly talking rationally, because those people were not ready to listen to others. Then you say that, well, fine, we will take up the common sources of knowledge, something like Einstein and Newton and things like that. So those of you who are familiar with the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, you'd see that Swamiji does talk about Darwin and others. And the third one is scriptures. So when the Indian scholars discuss, generally they omit the second part. Because supposing there is an argument, once I was at Haridwar, and there I heard a massive argument between the followers of Shankaracharya and Ramanujacharya. Now, the followers of Ramanujacharya will not accept what Shankara has said. So how will they argue? They will go by pure argument, and they will base their arguments on the Vedas. So you have the Vedas or the Upanishads, and then they will go by pure arguments. In today's world, supposing I want to talk to a teenager or a young man, that person will listen to me only if I am using pure arguments, and maybe bringing in some persons with whom he is familiar. Now, when people from other religions, say maybe Christians or Muslims, they want to argue, and when they attack, mostly they give up the first two. They never take it, accept the common sense arguments, and from science and from philosophy, never. They will base their arguments entirely on their sacred books. Now, supposing I go to a Christian world and say that my Upanishads say like that, why would they listen to me? They may listen to my pure arguments, which are based on this experiential world or common sense. They might even listen if I am using arguments based on, say, science. But I say that my Vedas say like that, Upanishads say like that, and there is somebody who says Bible says like that, and Quran says like that. Can there be a discussion? There can never be. This is where Vedanta surpasses others. No religion can ever compete with Vedanta. There is just no way, because Vedanta doesn't go by quotations. Vedanta doesn't say that since the Upanishads have said like this, and hence the truth is like this. And you are quite familiar, like there are people now, those of you who are on social media would know that they'll say that my sacred book, whatever that is, says like this. This is no way to argue. And if you don't agree with them, you will be bombed. Now, another problem comes up. Vedanta very clearly says that, very clearly, that even the Upanishads belong to, as Swami beautifully says, approaching real knowledge. Those of you who might have studied Mundak Upanishad, we will try to cover in our series of talks. Mundak Upanishad very clearly mentions that there are two kinds of knowledge: higher knowledge, lower knowledge. Higher knowledge is experience of the self directly. Lower knowledge is all the sciences, all the art, and then it adds the Vedas. Even the Vedas are equated, they're clubbed with books like science and art and other things. It can be disconcerting for common man. But if you are truly into religion, if you are truly into spirituality, it is very important for you to know your journey may begin with believing in certain things. It may begin with certain beliefs. But at a higher level, it cannot continue like that. Then you can never realize. So approaching real knowledge. Knowledge of the absolute depends upon no book, nor upon anything. It is absolute in itself. Knowledge is knowledge. If you want to know about Delhi, you can go on reading any number of books, but that will not really give you the knowledge of Delhi. To know Delhi, you will have to go to Delhi. And once you go to Delhi, you know what is Delhi. The knowledge of absolute can come only when you have the knowledge of absolute. Whatever the sacred book, every sacred book is just a pointer to that absolute knowledge. Unfortunately, people don't realize this. They don't understand it. No amount of study will give this knowledge. It is not theory, it is realization. When it comes to God, when it comes to self, Atman, Brahman, these are not theories, these are realization. If you realize, either you have realized it or you do not, have not realized it. If you have realized it, you have the knowledge. If you have not realized it, it is just a theory. It's of no use. And that is why, there is so much of verbal pollution, word pollution. People are talking, talking, talking. They have not realized God. And they just go on telling that my sacred book says this. In my book, Kratu, I made fun of it as toilet paper gang. You write something on toilet paper, and the toilet paper says, what I say is correct. Now, is this any argument? Cleanse the dust from the mirror, purify your own mind, and in a flash, you know that you are Brahman. Now, this is a very, very, very interesting statement. You can go on studying for thousands of years. Knowledge will not come to you because information comes bit by bit. Information comes bit by bit. Information comes bit by bit. Knowledge always comes in a flash. Once, long ago, when I used to read lots of fictions, I was reading one of those thrillers. That was many, many years, decades ago. In that story, there was a doctor who found that his secretary had been killed. And he found that there was some kind of bombing. And he went to the police, informed, etc. And he was not able to understand what's happening. And then he was walking down the road, and suddenly a car swerved by accident. And suddenly he realized that there was an attempt to kill him. And suddenly the whole thing became clear why there was an attempt to kill him. It's a very interesting story. Now, when I was reading that story, even at that time, I just smiled. Let's see, actually, this is what happens when you are into spiritual practices. You can go on studying any number of books. You can go on doing your jap dhyan. You can go on doing anything, anything, anything. Knowledge does not come because these are all information. And these are all struggle to hold on to that information. Knowledge comes in a flash. Once I had mentioned in this context the story of a person who wanted to know Tao. Tao is a very interesting philosophy for the Chinese and something akin to self-realization. So there was this problem who wanted to have the realization of Tao. And he said he didn't have time. He had hardly 3 months, which was too inadequate. So the master said, okay, fine, I'll teach you. I asked him to do household work. And every now and then, the teacher would jump at him with a sword. And the learner, he used to be surprised. So every now and then, in absolutely unexpected ways and at unexpected hours. And that made his mind so focused, so alert, that suddenly that knowledge dawned. Now, when you study these books, when you make spiritual practices, when you are with sadhus, when you are with the noble souls, what exactly happens? Your mind becomes more and more and more focused. When you do yogic meditation, same thing happens. Your mind becomes more and more focused. And then suddenly, in a flash, that knowledge dawns. Knowledge does not come bit by bit. It's something like switching on the light. When you switch on a bulb, darkness, howsoever old that might be, It vanishes with that flash. Just like that, that knowledge, it comes in a flash and it removes every kind of duality. It doesn't remove ignorance because duality is ignorance. The difference between I and you, this is ignorance, this is duality. And the duality vanishes forever. We will see more of this. So this is flash. You have to keep in mind that, very often when we were young monks, I mean, so every now and then we would go to our elders, and there are many, and I was lucky enough to be near Belur Math. So I knew many senior monks, and those senior monks, they were extremely respected. Those of you who are interested might see on my blog, I have written some one or two memoirs. This was on Upen Maharaj. About him I wrote. He was such a simple-hearted soul. And as luck would have, he was the first monk I had met when I was hardly 10 years old. And he was always in that thought. He was always in that thought of God and Atman. And yet, he was extremely kind to everybody. And in those young days, I used to be curious, am I progressing? So whenever I went and asked him, and or maybe any other monk, he would just laugh. Because in spiritual life, there is no progress. When you discuss progress, essentially you mean to say, is my mind more focused? That of course you yourself will know better than any other person. And as far as information is concerned, it has no value. Information has absolutely no value as far as spiritual realization is concerned. And when it comes to realization, it comes in a flash. Very often on this YouTube, there are these devotees, they keep asking, Kichui to hocche na, nothing is happening. But nothing is supposed to happen. Nothing is supposed to happen because when it happens, it will happen in a flash. If your mind is ready, if your mind is focused, and your mind is completely focused, knowledge will dawn upon you in a flash. We often compare spiritual realization mentally. We think it's something like growth in life, achievement in life, or when we were students, we got grades, and that way we knew where we stand. Spiritual knowledge is not like that. Either it is there or it is not there. It's 0, 1, 0, 1. Either you have it or you don't have it. And when it comes in a flash. And what is that knowledge? You are Brahman. Because we are discussing Brahma Sutra. And if it were Bhakti literature, it would be, you'd know God. God, the infinite. Not God as some kind of phantasm, not some kind of mental projection, but God, the way God is. That gives you some idea about what Vedanta is. God exists, not birth, nor death, not pain, nor misery, nor murder, nor change, nor good, nor evil. All is Brahman. Brahman alone exists. If I make things too simple, you can call it simplistic. When Acharya Shankar begins his Brahma Sutra commentary with Yusmat Asmat Pratyaya, your understanding of it's me and that's him, me and him. There is Pratyaya, the understanding. Ultimately, what happens in spiritual realization, it's not pratyaya, asmat, the sense of I. It becomes I alone exist. Yusmat vanishes. And if you are into bhakti literature, if you are a devotee of, say, Krishna or Shiva or Sri Ramakrishna, then you realize asmat pratyaya goes away, only yusmat remains. Only thou remains, I goes away. If you are a Vedantin, only I remains, thou goes away. Nothing else. It's same. But then it's not pratyaya. Pratyaya is the knowledge that is formed in your mind. This is not knowledge that is formed in mind. You realize this alone exists. You really cannot call it one. Because it exists, so to keep things simple, it is said that it is one. But actually it is beyond one and two or zero. So what about everything else that we have been experiencing throughout our life in both both as yusmat pratyaya and asmat pratyaya? We experience pain, we experience misery, we experience death, we experience life. You realize nothing exists. Only Brahman, pure consciousness exists. Nothing else. We take the rope for the serpent. The error is ours. Now, this is where Vedanta becomes completely different from every other system of spiritual philosophy in the world. Those of you who might have read my book, The World of Religions, there, if you go through Zoroastrianism, the Parsi religion of the Parsis, there you will see you have a clear-cut distinction between the good and the evil. Aur Mazda, Ahirman. There's a clear distinction between good and evil. And somehow, because Iran and Israel, they were all nearby, it's very difficult to say how exactly Christianity and Islam were influenced by this idea of this Cartesian divide between the good and the bad. But they were. And ultimately, you find that in Semitic religions, as also in Zoroastrianism, and that's why we have Western religion and Eastern religion. Because in a Western religion, the evil, the bad, has a distinct personality, is a distinct entity, not in Indic religions. Be it Buddhism. In Buddhism, we have Mar, but Mar is not an ultimate entity. It does not have an absolute existence the way we have of Saturn. No, we don't have. And that's why you will see that, particularly in Christian stories, if you do something wrong, you blame it on the devil. Every time you do something wrong, you blame it on the devil, on the temptation, etc. Original sin. Not in India. Here, you take the blame upon yourself. How? You say, my mind was deluded. Because we are continuously under delusion. We are continuously under delusion. And this error, we are seeing this world, we are seeing this yusmat pratyaya. We are taking this world. It is because we are incompetent. No one else has put the error. God should not be blamed for that. No other force can be blamed for that. It's me, it's I alone who is responsible for this error. We can only do good when we love God and He reflects our love. If you really want to do good, Swamiji, while discussing Brahma Sutra, he somehow brings in the Christian concepts and also the social understanding. If you really want to do good, you can only do good when you love God. Otherwise, it becomes something like Christian charity. You're doing charity. It doesn't help you much. I mean, it's definitely better than doing nothing. But as far as spirituality is concerned, no, it doesn't help you much. Because when you love God, that gets reflected. And that is when you can serve others. The murderer is God, and the clothing of murderer is only superimposed upon him. When it says clothing of murderer, that is the mind that he has. It's a superimposition. When you say that that person is a saint, it's a superimposition. And when you say he's a sinner, it's a superimposition. If you see these things from, say, standpoint of, say, Semitic religions, they will never understand it. If you are a saint, you are a saint. If you are a sinner, you are a sinner. Then you might even say that God has made him a saint, God has made him a sinner. That's the second. But in Hinduism, there is neither saint nor sinner. It's all clothing of murderer. In the Vedas, we come across this famous mantra, Tvam Sri Tvam Pumanasi, O Lord, you alone have become female, you alone have become man, you alone are a child, you alone are an old man. It's a clothing, it's a packaging. And this modern management is about packaging. It's packaging. Remove the packaging. Just remove that packaging and you will see that it's the same stuff. Absolutely the same stuff. To explain this idea, people use, the commentators, different commentators and different masters have used different examples. Sometimes they use the example gold and ornament, clay and idols and things like that. Idea remains the same. You are a male because you have clothing of a male. I don't mean this clothing, that mental clothing. And you are a female because you have clothing of that. And you are a sinner because you have that clothing. You are a saint because you have that. You are a politician because you are that. You are a writer because of that. Remove those trappings, those clothings, and you become what you are. It's only superimposed upon him. Superimposition, as we discussed in the previous talk. Take him by the hand and tell him the truth. This is a beautiful statement. Those of you who are deep into it, who really want to do good to the world, tell yourself. Hold your hand. Hold your own hand and say that you are Brahman. Sometimes we pat the back of the kid, back of the kid, and we say, "Oh, you have been good. You are good. You are good." You pat and say, "You are good." Just like that. Pat yourself and say, "You are Brahman." And then when you feel that those thoughts are becoming powerful within you, if you meet somebody, you just tell, "You are that." You won't believe, you will think that you are crazy. That does not matter. Talk lightly, laugh at it, but try to give the idea. Once the seed is there, a time may come when that seed will bloom into a tree. And that person may realize, "Oh my God, what I have been doing? And why I miss the bus? Why I miss the opportunity?" Take him by the hand and tell him the truth. When some of my own experiences are so funny about myself that I have so many jokes about myself. When I remember them, I laugh. When I was a young brahmachari, in Ramakrishna mission, you have to be in white cloth as a brahmachari for 9 years. It had been 5-7 years, and once a senior monk, he came to Advaita Ashram. I was staying at Advaita Ashram, and this senior monk, a very nice monk, he knew me for many years, and he loved me. He loved me a lot. He had to travel by train to some place. And I was so good at train timings, particularly of the Eastern Railway. Train starting from Howrah going towards Delhi. I was so good at. I just went on rattling off the details. You can take this train, get on there, and you can take this connection. I just went on, and he looked at me with amazement. He was impressed. And then he told another monk who was standing by the side, he has so much information about the external world, but no information about his own inner world. My God, believe me. I felt as if a bucket of cold water has been poured upon me. That senior monk just smiled and says, see, so much information about the external world and no information about his own inner world. I felt embarrassed. No, I didn't feel hurt or angry. I felt embarrassed and a bit ashamed of myself. But it's a very funny story. When you look at the present India, India shining, India rising, India this, India that, what's happening? You're slowly mastering the external world. You have information and knowledge about certain aspects of the external world. As far as your inner world is concerned, you're a big fat zero. So take him by the hand and tell him the truth. Now, we were discussing in the beginning that the Vedas have two sections. One that deals with yajnas, sacrifices and rituals. The other one deal with knowledge. The moment you have rituals, you will have many conditions imposed. Many conditions imposed. That how a ritual can be performed, who can perform those rituals, when those rituals can be performed, and ultimately we become such a ritualistic religion. Hinduism becomes such a ritualistic religion that there were major classifications. Brahmins can do it, and Brahmins can perform it for the Kshatriyas and things like that. And then came Shudras. No, Shudras have to be kept outside, and females have to. All stupid things. All stupid things. Vedanta does not discriminate. Rituals will always discriminate. It is just immaterial where from that ritual is coming. You even say in Roman Catholic, they don't allow female priests. Why? Because rituals will always have conditions. Rituals will always impose certain limitations. Now, when Hindus are criticized for its caste system and they have far-fetched ideas about discrimination, no, it's not. Hindus do not discriminate. The discrimination is because of the rituals, and that discrimination is powered by the society. But as far as real religion is concerned, there is no discrimination. In other religions, they have discrimination. In Hinduism, there is no discrimination. And Acharya Shankara uses it. He says that there is a fundamental difference between Vedanta and the popular concept of yajna. Yajna will say that this so and so persons cannot perform these sacrifices, these rituals. In Vedanta, nothing matters because Atman, the soul, is beyond all this. Soul has no caste. So when they say that Hinduism has caste, yes, of course. Hinduism has caste because it is a social thing. It has affected the rituals. But the society and the rituals do not make a religion. To know a religion, you have to go to its spiritual core. The spiritual core of Hinduism is what? We know from Vedanta. There is no caste, there is no gender. Hinduism, as far as religion is concerned, for I don't want to take names, but you go to certain religion and you'll find there's a clear distinction. Not only in rituals, but in actual religion, in spiritual philosophy, females are considered inferior. Females need to be protected in a particular way and things like that. Not in Hinduism. The spiritual philosophy of the Hindus does not discriminate. The problem with Hindu religion is that Hinduism was not taught by the right persons. After Shankaracharya, and Shankaracharya was also under the influence of the then society, although he tried to break the molds. And after that, there was a huge vacuum. Then came Swami Vivekananda. If you want to understand Hinduism, you have to study Swami Vivekananda. Without understanding Swami Vivekananda, you cannot understand Hindu religion. You can study the Vedas and you can study the Mahabharata. No, you cannot. Hinduism can be taught only by a master. Why? Because society and rituals, they have created such a mess, such a jumble of Hindu religion. We don't know what is right and what is wrong. I wrote Living Hinduism just to give a fair idea of what truly Hindu religion is. Then I found that not many were reading it. And then I wrote a shorter version, The Hindu Way. These are basically two different approach. And I still feel that every Hindu should have a copy of The Hindu Way. And that every Hindu should distribute 10 copies, 20 copies each of that book to people whom they know, whether or not they read. So one of my former students, who is on very friendly terms with me, he told me, Swami, why you have written this book? I know I'm a Hindu, and I know that I should go to a temple. What else is there to know about Hindu religion? And I told him, exactly this is why I wrote the book, The Hindu Way. You read the book, The Hindu Way, and you will know what your religion is, what your mother religion is. This is the problem with Hindu religion. We don't know what our religion is. And we don't even want to spread the message that, look, actual Hinduism is this. Not that it has been hijacked by the negative forces. No. Just that too much of moss has grown all around the religion. Proper care has not been taken to clear the weeds. Proper care has not been taken to tell what exactly we stand for. And one of our devotees and their family, they're very old devotees, practically since the time of the founding of the Ramakrishna mission. And the lady of the family, she is deep into studying Ramakrishna mission literature, and they're great devotees. So when I was delivering these talks on Inspire Talks in Bengali, she heard and she was shocked. And she said she did not even know that such a book existed. From Swami Vivekananda, imagine. And believe me, this is the most important work by Swamiji, because here he has poured his heart out as far as spiritual philosophy, not only of the Hindus, of the world, has been poured out. I keep telling people to read these inspired talks and try to understand, try to grasp as much as one can. Soul has no caste, and to think it has is a delusion. Because it's a delusion. Any kind of distinction, any kind of duality is a delusion, belongs to Yusmat Pratyay. So are life and death, or any emotion or quality. Quality here means quality of good or bad. It can also mean sattva, rajas, tamas. The Atman never changes, never goes, nor comes. The example that I often use to make this idea clear, think of a portrait, a landscape, either a portrait or a hilly landscape. And imagine yourself to be someone whose eyes are completely covered with a very little hole through which you can see. And you can move your eyes only in a particular direction. So, what will happen? Like as you have in the board game Snake and Ladder, you can move across a line, then go up, move across another line, and you keep on moving. And through that, you get a picture of what it is. As your eyes keep moving and seeing through that peephole, after a time, you forget that it's your head that is moving. You feel as if the sides are moving. You know the immediate past. You may remember the remote past. You don't know what is there in store, or you don't know what is there in the future. And you feel as if that entire site is moving. Whole thing is moving. There is life, there is death. Those of you who might have played snakes and ladder in your childhood would remember. Now you climb up, and now you are bitten by the snake and go down, and like that. And when you find somebody who gets a chance to climb up, you become angry. You tend to get angry. At least when we were kids, we used to. When you are bitten by a snake, you become hurt. And one day, that the trap that has been put on your eyes, the blinkers, they are removed. And then what do you see? You see that complete picture. There is no movement, nothing, everything is static. This is the nearest example that we can give you to convey the idea of what Atman is. There is no movement of whatsoever. There is no rise, there is no fall, there is no death, there is no birth, there is no pain, no pleasure. It's all one whole complete thing. The Atman never changes, never goes, nor comes. We feel that way. Why? Because we have blinkers on our eyes. Our understanding of this world, of this universe, and the of spiritual reality is so limited that we are kind of moving and we think that the entire thing is moving. It is the eternal witness of all its own manifestation. Now, this is where Vedanta comes again. It is the eternal witness of what? Its own manifestations. Now imagine that portrait that we had been discussing, supposing a part of it somehow becomes externalized, puts a blinker on itself and looks at itself. Or better still, you keep a mirror, stand before a mirror, put a blinker, and put a blinker on yourself in such a way that you are looking at your image and just moving just like as you move in snake and ladder. And sometimes you see this, sometimes you see that, sometimes you see this, sometimes you see that. But you never get a complete picture. Then you remove the blinker. See? You. You can create your own examples. There's a portrait of yourself and you have some small torchlight. With the help of that, you are seeing. You cannot see the entire picture. The limitedness in which we are tied down is because of the mind. The hugeness that stands before us is a true us. So, it is the eternal witness of all its own manifestation, but we take it for the manifestation, an eternal illusion without beginning or end, ever going on. So unfortunate. We ourselves, we as Atman, we have become this universe and we feel we are trapped here. And we look at God and we are totally confused in this state without ever realizing what the truth is. The Vedas, however, have to come down to our level for. If they told us the highest truth in the highest way, we could not understand it. A true teacher, a true master has to come down to the level of the learner. And this is what the Vedas do. The Vedas know that desire, desire to succeed and desire to outrun others, this is the primary motive force in any person. We want to succeed and we want others to fail. We may talk about teamwork and we may talk about taking everybody along. But anyone who has little understanding of human psychology would know that we want to succeed and we want others to fail. The Vedas make use of this human nature, human psychology, and they say that they put those spiritual truths in simple words and say, okay, you want to succeed, perform this yajna with the help of this mantra. And you want your enemies to fall down, okay, you perform this yajna. Because they hope that the kind of rituals that they impose and the kind of preliminary purity that they require for doing those things will cleanse their mind a bit. And the lucky ones will evolve a little. See, today I was talking to one of our listeners. I've never met her, Krishna Banerjee. She's a medical doctor somewhere in Tejpur or somewhere. I was talking. And she was telling me, after listening to my talks, she got so impressed that she started feeding the birds regularly. And from there, she has evolved further. And while putting those grains and seeds for the birds, she prays that, oh birds, those of you who are taking these, may you have a better life next time. And she has a pet dog. She was telling me. And she takes the dog in her lap, pats on its head, and prays, may you have a better life next time. I was moved to tears. This is what we want. We want to move ahead. And we want to take others. We want to take others along with us. We want that everyone should move forward. Everyone should move ahead. This is what the Vedas want. The Vedas know that we are trapped. We are trapped in our individuality. And they want that we should progress. They said, okay, fine. If you want to be greedy, express your greed through yajna. If you want to be violent, express your violence through yajna. And that is what the Vedas do, because the highest of truth we will not be able to understand. The highest truth has to come packaged the way we can grasp it. So we will continue with this talk next class. Thank you so much. Time is up.